In 1858, Theodore Hyatt included military drill and uniforms as part of the curriculum for his select school for boys. Legend would have it that Hyatt wandered into the school gymnasium one day to discover his pupils drilling with broomsticks, and that inspired him to introduce military training as part of the boys' exercise routine. The military component soon became the main focus of the institution, and Theodore Hyatt's select school for boys became Pennsylvania Military Academy, which later became Pennsylvania Military College. Since the Civil War, PMC men have served their country. In 1869, Pennsylvania Military Academy became the first military college other than West Point to have the War Department assign to it a regular Army detail of instructors for leadership and tactical training and weapons instruction of the cadets. The quality of the military program was recognized by the War Department as being, quote, distinguished, unquote. PMC leadership helped shape the nation's military for more than a century. After the passage of the National Defense Act in 1916, PMC was designated a Reserve Officer Training Course, or ROTC unit. Nearly 60% of PMC cadets and alumni served as commissioned officers during World War II. These stories are samples of their service. Robert S. CURRIER, Company A, 1st Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division. Silver Star, awarded posthumously. Robert CURRIER joined the PMC prep school and went on from prep school private to a cadet lieutenant in his senior year at PMC. His classmates called him Horizontal Twitch for his frequent reading of Morpheus, the classical poem written by the Roman poet Ovid, while in an inclined position. After graduating, CURRIER was commissioned a second lieutenant and was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, where he then earned his jump wings and was assigned to Company A, 1st Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Division. During Operation Market Garden in 1944, the 504th was ordered to clear the western suburbs of the Dutch city of Nijmegen in Holland. On the afternoon of 20 September 1944, the 82nd Airborne conducted a successful but bloody assault across the Waal River against strong German opposition. Having secured crossing sites of the Waal River, men of the 82nd Airborne Division captured the northern end of the Nijmegen Road Bridge, thus preparing the way for the advance of Allied armored forces across the river. During the assault, First Lieutenant CURRIER was killed in action. His name is on a memorial on the north shore of the Waal River in Nijmegen, along with 47 other U.S. soldiers killed in the assault that afternoon. John L. FANCOURT, class of 1943, 179th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division. John FANCOURT, commonly known as Jack, attended PMC after completing Germantown Academy. He was a local track star, and by his senior year at PMC, he held the Middle Atlantic Association record for the 220-yard dash. After graduating, he attended Infantry Officer Candidate School, but failed to graduate because of a deficiency in mathematics. Private FANCOURT requested and received a transfer to join replacement forces. He was assigned to the 179th Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Tomahawks, of the Army's 45th Infantry Division. On January 22, 1944, Allied forces made an amphibious landing near Anzio, Italy. Their limited advance inland was stopped by a German counterattack. 2 days later, the Germans made another counterattack and destroyed one battalion of the 179th, forcing the remainder of the regiments to retreat. FANCOURT's unit suffered heavy casualties in these actions, but he, now a staff sergeant, survived. However, shortly thereafter, he was captured by the Germans and forced to walk north toward Rome with other prisoners. After 4 days, they reached a prisoner of war stockade near Rome. The temporary stockade was surrounded by barbed wire, but only lightly guarded by German soldiers. One night, an air raid distracted the guards, enabling FANCOURT and several others to escape. For the next several months, FANCOURT, who had grown a mustache and long hair, hid in an apartment in Rome and eluded recapture with the help of Italian underground. In June, Rome was liberated and FANCOURT returned to active duty. He returned to PMC at the request of Major General James Ulio, Adjutant General of the Army, and a trustee of the Pennsylvania Military College. FANCOURT remained at PMC as a staff member of the Army Specialized Training, or AST unit. Jack FANCOURT was honorably discharged from the Army in late 1945 and joined his family business, W.F. FANCOURT and Company, makers of textile soaps in Philadelphia. Eventually, the company and FANCOURT moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. He died in 1996. Russell A. Frias, Jr., class of 1941. 423rd Infantry Regiment, 106th Infantry Division. Silver Star, awarded posthumously. Russ Frias attended Glenmore High School in Glenolden, Pennsylvania before coming to PMC. Cadets described him as one of the pluckiest football players of his time. While playing football at PMC, he became an outstanding guard. As a cadet, he was described as having great energy and determination. After graduation, he joined the Army and was eventually assigned to the 106th Infantry Division. A week before the start of the Battle of the Bulge in mid-December 1944, the 106th Division was sent into the front lines near Schonberg, Belgium, in relief of the 2nd Infantry Division. The Germans began their assault through the Ardennes forest at dawn on December 16, 1944, and the men of the 106th Division stared directly down the gun barrels of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division. The German attack included the capture of a key road intersection in the town of Blai-Elf, which was on the border between Belgium and Germany. Blai-Elf lay in the sector of the 423rd Regiment, to which Russ Frias belonged. In their initial attack the morning of the 16th, the Germans seized control of the lower two-thirds of the town. However, the German advance was halted by the arrival on the scene of more than 200 American reinforcements, including the 423rd Service Company, which had been reorganized as a rifle company and commanded by Captain Frias. These reinforcements were then ordered to counterattack. Frias personally led his men in the house-to-house fighting among the town's buildings. After 3 days of arduous combat, 2 regiments of the 106th Division, the 422nd and the 423rd Regiments, were surrounded by the enemy. A bold attack to break out through German lines was unsuccessful. Both regiments surrendered to the Germans. The survivors of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments were then organized for transport to a prisoner of war camp in Germany. Frias was killed when a group of soldiers attempted to escape their German captors. For his display of outstanding courage and leadership, he was awarded the Silver Star posthumously. Thomas N. Marendino, class of 1941, 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, 3 Silver Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross. Tommy Marendino was known as a scholar and gentleman at PMC. He was a versatile athlete and played football, basketball, and baseball. Yet it was his smile and good humor that his classmates remembered most. Upon graduation from PMC in 1941, Marendino was commissioned in the U.S. Army as Second Lieutenant of Infantry. He was soon assigned to the 16th Infantry Regiment of the Army's 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, a prestigious veteran division of the First World War. By 1942, Marendino, the 16th Regiment, the 1st Division, were engaged in combat operations against French Vichy forces in North Africa, and then in 1943, they saw action against German and Italian forces in Sicily. Subsequently, the Big Red One moved to England in preparation with other Allied forces for the June 1944 invasion of German-occupied France at Normandy, in an event commonly known today as D-Day. The D-Day mission of the 16th Infantry Regiment was to land on Omaha Beach, overcome the enemy's beach defenses, and move inland over the enemy-occupied high ground to establish a secure bridgehead. Captain Merendino was in command of the 16th Regiment's B Company, 236 men. As the company's landing crafts approached the beach, they came under intense enemy fire. Many men of the 16th Regiment, to include Merendino's Company B, were killed and wounded as they attempted to exit their landing craft. Others were hit as they struggled through the surf or tried to run across the sand beaches weighted down with waterlogged equipment. At the beach seawall, Merendino rallied surviving B Company men and soldiers from other units who survived the landing. He ultimately led his composite force forward off the beach and up the escarpment through intense enemy fire. In that action, he organized an assault group to advance on a German bunker. Fully exposed to sweeping fire from machine guns and snipers, Captain Tommy Merendino personally led the charge up the slope and wiped out the German strongpoint. On July 2, 1944, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the 1st Division in Normandy and pinned awards for heroism on 25 1st Division heroes, including Merendino, who received the Distinguished Service Cross. This was not Merendino's first act of valor. His gallantry was also recognized with Silver Stars for gallantry in Algeria in 1942 and in Sicily in 1943. Merendino remained in the Army until the end of the war. Having fulfilled his duty as he saw it, he returned to his home in Ventnor, New Jersey. He married, raised a family, and worked as a vehicle inspector for the state of New Jersey. Richard O'Malley, class of 1938, 2nd Battalion, 12th Infantry Regiment, 4th Infantry Division. Silver Star, awarded posthumously. Richard O'Malley joined the Army in 1940. In 1943, he deployed to England with the 4th Infantry Division, where he served as commander of H Company, 2nd Battalion, 12th Infantry Regiment. On D-Day at Normandy, the 12th Infantry Regiment spearheaded the invasion of the Cherbourg Peninsula, landing at Utah Beach between Uncle Red and Tara Green sectors. As the 2nd Battalion moved inland, it became engaged in a fierce firefight with German defenders at Neuville-au-Pla. When the battalion commander was killed, O'Malley, now a major, assumed command of the battalion and proceeded to the front lines. In leading the soldiers of the 2nd Battalion forward, O'Malley could be heard calling, "Up and at 'em! 2nd Battalion, follow me!" The advance of the 2nd Battalion was opposed by 2 enemy-occupied pillboxes, small concrete forts near 2 stone quarries. O'Malley led a fierce attack and, in conjunction with supporting tank fire, overcame the enemy. After the capture of the port of Cherbourg on June 26th, the 12th Infantry was repositioned to the Santenay front. O'Malley's men then became engaged in fierce fighting against the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division Gotz von Berchtesgaden. These elite enemy forces were entrenched in the hedgerows of the Normandy countryside. Although wounded twice, O'Malley continued to lead the 2nd Battalion from a frontline position. Only hours before the battalion was to be relieved and rotated to a rear area on July 16th, an enemy sniper shot and killed O'Malley. O'Malley's fearless leadership and concern for his troops endeared him to his men, who called him the Iron Major. When Major General Raymond Barton, commander of the 4th Infantry Division, learned of the loss of Major O'Malley, he was so moved that he ordered the mass firing of 3 volleys of the 4th Infantry Division's artillery and mortars into enemy lines. This was the only time in World War II that this honor was given by the 4th Infantry Division. For his tremendous courage and valor, Richard O'Malley, the Iron Major, was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for Valor. Jesse W. Roberts, class of 1936, 702nd Tank Destroyer Battalion, 2nd Armored Division. Jesse Roberts came to PMC from Upper Darby High School and a term in the Pennsylvania Military Prep School. Roberts was gregarious and outgoing. He played football, was part of the cavalry squad. His keen sense of humor and love of a good practical joke resulted in his intimate acquaintance with the delinquent guard, later known to some of us as walking tours. Upon graduation, he worked at his family business. Roberts returned to PMC as the adjutant in 1941 and continued in that role until he was called to active duty in the Army in January of 1942. After attending the Tank Destroyer School, he was assigned to the 702nd Tank Destroyer Battalion, the 70 Deuce, which landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy, France in mid-June 1944. In early July, they entered the front line of fighting as part of the 2nd Armored Division. Roberts and the 702nd participated in the breakout and pursuit phases of the Allied advance across France. When the Germans counterattacked in the Ardennes forest in December 1944, the 2nd Armored Division was ordered to seize Buisonville, Belgium. Company A of the 702nd, led by Lieutenant Roberts, moved toward Buisonville and attacked the 2nd Panzer Division and elements of the 116th Panzer Division as they were preparing to move north. Encountering and destroying several German tanks, Roberts positioned his troops on an exposed ridge where they battled the enemy hidden in the woods. His platoon braved enemy tank and artillery fire to participate in the destruction of 2 German Panther tanks, 2 88mm anti-tank guns, 1 self-propelled 75mm gun, 1 armored car, 1 personnel carrier, and 8 trucks. After that success, Roberts led an attack against German Panther tanks near Leeuwarden, Belgium. Jesse Roberts was wounded multiple times in battle and eventually evacuated to a field hospital. He was awarded the British Military Cross Medal for his heroic actions. The award, personally presented by British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. Jess Roberts survived his wounds and returned home after the war, where the Roberts family connection to PMC continued. Roberts was the president of the Alumni Association and later the PMC Parents Association. Both of his sons, Jesse W. Roberts Jr., class of 1966, and David J. Roberts, class of 1971, were members of the Corps of Cadets and graduated from PMC. Carl SCHAUBEL, class of 1930, 79th Infantry Division and Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. What drew Carl Jimmy SCHAUBEL to PMC in the fall of 1926 was his interest in horses. He learned to ride and became a fine polo player under the tutelage of PMC President and Commandant Frank K. Hyatt. Being a member of the undefeated polo team in 1930 was a highlight of SCHAUBEL's time as a cadet. After graduation, SCHAUBEL was asked to remain at PMC as coach of the polo team and assistant professor of military science and tactics. As a polo coach, he was considered to be one of the best in the country. He also served 10 years in the Army Reserves after graduation. However, in 1940, he volunteered for active duty in the Army. His first assignment was at PMC in large part due to Frank Hyatt's influence. This was followed by a similar assignment at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. During the Second World War, SCHAUBEL was assigned as a staff officer in General Dwight D. Eisenhower's Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, which was then located in London, England. Following the June 1944 Allied landings in Normandy, France, SCHAUBEL traveled throughout northern France and Germany as part of an advance team for General Eisenhower's personal headquarters. When the war ended, Major SCHAUBEL was sent on a special mission which included travels throughout the Middle East and the Soviet bloc to include Russia. He was then transferred to the Pentagon. After leaving the Army, SCHAUBEL worked for the Dunlap Printing Company. In 1964, he returned to PMC as a staff vice president and retired in 1973. William J. WOLFGRAM, class of 1943, 87th Infantry Regiment, 10th Mountain Division. Bronze Star for Valor, awarded posthumously. William John WOLFGRAM was born in Wisconsin. After graduating from Northwestern Military and Naval Academy, he enrolled at Harvard University, where he excelled academically. In response to the United States joining the Second World War in December 1941, He left Harvard and enrolled at PMC as a cadet, earning his wartime diploma in 1943. Upon graduation and commissioning, Second Lieutenant WOLFGRAM was assigned as an infantry platoon leader in the 10th Mountain Division. True to its title, the soldiers of this division were trained to fight and survive under the most brutal mountain conditions. At the end of their training in the western Rocky Mountains of the United States, mainly in the states of Washington and Colorado, the division shipped out to Italy in December 1944 and January 1945. On February 18, 1945, the 87th Regiment of the 10th Mountain Division was ordered to attack strong German defensive positions on Riva Ridge along the Gustav Line in Italy's northern Apennine Mountains. Making that attack with the 87th Regiment was the 1st Platoon of L Company, commanded by Lieutenant WOLFGRAM. The advance of the 87th Regiment was soon pinned down along Riva Ridge by heavy enemy mortar and machine gun fire. The 87th Regiment, to include Company L, was ordered to continue the attack along Riva Ridge and eliminate the enemy's defensive positions. As WOLFGRAM's rifle platoon began its assault, it came under effective fire from German machine guns and mortars. The enemy's defensive fires were now focused upon him and the soldiers he led. Lieutenant William J. WOLFGRAM was seriously wounded in the attack at Riva Ridge, and the 44 men of the platoon he led were cut down to only 19 remaining. WOLFGRAM did not survive his battle wounds. He was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star for Valor for heroic achievements in action. In early 1948, his parents, Edith and Frank WOLFGRAM, established the William J. WOLFGRAM English Reference Library at PMC. Over the following years, the family continued their support and played an active role in the growth of the current WOLFGRAM Library at Widener University, named in memory of their son. Herb R. AMEY Jr., class of 1935, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division, Silver Star, awarded posthumously. Uncle Herb, as Herb AMEY was called by many of his PMC classmates, was a tall, black-haired cadet who had earned the respect and admiration of the Corps of Cadets during his 4 years at the college. Academically, he was an excellent student. He played guard on the football team and captained the baseball team. After graduating, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. 8 years later, on November 20th, 1943, AMEY, now a Marine Lieutenant Colonel, was preparing the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Marine Regiment for the amphibious assault on the Tarawa Atoll, located in the Gilbert Islands in the Central Pacific Ocean, midway between the Hawaiian Islands and New Guinea. The 2nd Marines' landings against the Japanese stronghold on the island of Bitio in the southwest corner of the atoll immediately ran into trouble. After the first 3 waves of his battalion had departed for the beach, AMEY ordered the Higgins boat landing craft of his command group closer to the shore. According to Robert Sherrod, a war correspondent for Time and Life magazines embedded with the 2nd Battalion, AMEY somehow flagged down 2 amphibious tractors, technically called Landing Vehicle Track or LVT, and transferred his command group into them. Proceeding to the landing beaches, AMEY's LVT was forced to halt about 200 yards from the beach by a barbed wire obstacle on the island's natural protective reef. With forward movement to the beach and the LVT now stalled, AMEY led his men over the side into the water up to their necks. "Come on, gang," he shouted. "They can't stop us." As he led his men through the treacherous waters, AMEY was mortally wounded by enemy machine gun fire before reaching the shore. Refusing medical assistance, AMEY urged his command to continue to the landing beach without him. For his courageous actions, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert R. AMEY Jr. was posthumously awarded the Silver Star for gallantry, the citation reading in part, quote, "His brilliant leadership, great personal valor, and unrelenting devotion to duty in the face of grave peril served as an inspiration to the men under his command and were in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service." Henry T. Feige, class of 1935, Underwater Demolition Team 6, Silver Star. Henry Feige was a native of South Jersey and attended the University of Pennsylvania for 2 years before transferring to PMC. At PMC, he studied civil engineering and was a member of the rifle team. In his senior year, he was a cadet lieutenant for B Company. In 1943, Feige joined one of the U.S. Navy's underwater demolition teams, or UDT. The UDTs were a specialized unit composed mainly of Navy and Seabee volunteers, more commonly known as frogmen. They were the forerunners of today's Navy SEAL teams. Their mission was to rid the landing beaches of obstacles and clear them for incoming landing craft during amphibious assaults. They trained in the swamps of Fort Pierce, Florida, followed by additional training in the ocean off Hawaii. Lieutenant Feige was awarded the Silver Star for distinguishing himself in action as a member of UD Team 6 during the assault and capture of the Japanese-held islands of Saipan and Guam. His award citation read in part, "In the face of enemy rifle, machine gun, and mortar fire, he bravely prepared the way for the operations of combat troops and by his courageous devotion to duty contributed greatly to the success of the hazardous missions." Henry Feige left the military in 1945 and reportedly worked for Sunoco Incorporated. He and his wife Dorothy endowed an environmental science scholarship at Widener University before he passed away in 2001. George KASSAB, class of 1940, 530th Bombardment Squadron, 380th Bomb Group, 5th Air Force, Distinguished Flying Cross. George KASSAB missed the first few months of his senior year at PMC due to a serious illness. Upon his healthy return to campus, KASSAB stayed cheerful and found time to mingle with his classmates, even with the heavy burden of making up his classwork. Immediately after graduating in 1940, George volunteered for active duty in the Army Air Corps. After initial pilot training, certification, and 10 months of additional training in Australia and New Guinea, he was assigned to the 380th Bombardment Group Heavy, popularly known as the Flying Circus. The 380th was also known as King of the Heavies, in recognition of the long-range, 4-engine B-24 Liberator heavy bombers which they flew in the Southwest Pacific Theater. A subordinate command of the 380th Bomb Group was the 530th Bombardment Squadron, which included bomber pilot George KASSAB and the squadron mascot, the cartoon character Bugs Bunny. One day in July 1943, the B-24 bomber nicknamed Old Hickory of the 530th Squadron, piloted by Jack Britton and George KASSAB, was sent to the Celebes Island Group in the Western Pacific area of present-day Indonesia. Their assigned bombing mission was in response to intelligence report that a Japanese cruiser would be in the vicinity. No enemy cruiser was found, but Old Hickory was attacked by 4 Japanese Zeros, enemy fighter planes on patrol. Despite severe damage sustained during the Japanese fighter attacks, KASSAB's B-24 crew shot down 3 of the attacking enemy aircraft, and pilots Britton and KASSAB successfully returned Old Hickory to base. In recognition of KASSAB's courageous service and extraordinary achievement during the aerial fight, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. After completing 37 combat missions and over 300 hours of combat flying, KASSAB was given leave to return home, and subsequently, having fulfilled his duty, he was honorably discharged from the Army Air Corps. After the war, George traveled and worked in New York City and the New England states prior to returning to Chester. By 1952, he was co-owner of the Bailey Printing Company in nearby Collingdale, Pennsylvania, and was listed as a member of the PMC Alumni Association. Benjamin Ralph KIMLAU, class of 1942, 530th Bombardment Squadron, 380th Bomb Group, 5th Air Force. After graduating from high school in 1937, Ben KIMLAU traveled to China with his parents to meet his relatives. While there, he witnessed the Japanese invasion of his ancestral homeland. The following year, he enrolled at the Pennsylvania Military College. Ben became the president of his senior class, So at commencement, he passed the saber symbolic of his leadership on to the juniors. He was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Army Field Artillery. He subsequently transferred to the Army Air Corps, earned his pilot wings, and was assigned to the 530th Squadron of the 380th Bomb Group, the same squadron in which George KASSAB, class of 1940, served. In February 1944, the 380th was ordered to bombard enemy airfields around New Guinea, in coordination with the Army's 1st Cavalry Division landings on Los Negros, an island adjacent to New Guinea. On March 5th, KIMLAU and fellow bomber pilots in the 530th Squadron were ordered to attack the Japanese rear area at Los Negros. During the attack, the Japanese defenders shot down some of the attacking U.S. bombers, including the one KIMLAU was piloting. Because of their tremendous courage, dedication, and heroism, the 380th Bombardment Squadron was awarded 2 Presidential Unit citations during their combat actions in the Pacific Theater of Operations. This operation was one of those cited. In 1946, World War II veterans of Chinese-American heritage honored KIMLAU's life and achievements by founding the American Legion Lieutenant B.R. Kimbrough Chinese Memorial Post 1291 in New York City. In addition, in 1961, they also established KIMLAU Square at the center of Chatham Square, also in New York City. Joseph Lopret, class of 1942. Assault and Demolition Platoon, 24th Marine Regiment. Silver Star. At the end of his sophomore year at Fordham University, Joe Lopret transferred to PMC. A Brooklynite, Lopret made many friends thanks to his fun personality and infectious humor. He was a star on the track team and on the rifle range, and he had a well-known passion for lifting weights in his dorm room. 6 days after graduation from PMC in 1942, Lopret joined the U.S. Marine Corps and was ultimately assigned to the 24th Regiment of the 4th Marine Division. The 4th Marine Division was one of 3 Marine divisions that landed on the island of Iwo Jima in February 1945. The Marines were determined to take the island. The Japanese were determined to defend it. The Japanese bunker held up the advance of the 24th Marine 2nd Battalion. Lopret valiantly led his assault and demolition platoon forward, eventually destroying the bunker. The Marines suffered numerous casualties in the attacks, and in a hasty reorganization of the 24th Regiment, Lopret was given command of a rifle platoon when its commander was killed in action. The Japanese had additional fortified positions and continued to inflict severe casualties, and they again halted the 2nd Battalion's advance. Lopret realized that a quick advance was necessary to avoid further losses. He personally led his men forward against the Japanese and annihilated them. Lopret was awarded the Silver Star for his leadership, courage, and devotion to duty. Referring to Lopret, one Marine said, quote, "I will go anywhere he leads me," unquote. After the war, Major Lopret served as an instructor at the Marine Training School in Quantico, Virginia. In 1967, Colonel Lopret became the commander of the 3rd Marine Regiment and served in Vietnam. After serving in the Marine Corps for 31 years, Colonel Lopret retired from active duty in 1973. Joseph P. McCAFFERY, class of 1927, 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, Silver Star and Navy Cross, awarded posthumously. During his 4 years at PMC, Joe McCAFFERY, known as Little Joe, became well regarded as a marksman and athlete. McCaffrey's roommate described him as the undisputed leader of the football team and said McCAFFERY played every minute of every game his last 2 seasons. After graduation, McCAFFERY was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the Army Reserves. However, he subsequently resigned his Army commission to accept a commission in the United States Marine Corps and eventually joined the Marine Raiders. The Raiders were elite special operations forces that spearheaded amphibious operations and conducted light infantry warfare behind enemy lines. In September 1943, McCAFFERY, now a lieutenant colonel, took command of the now famous 2nd Marine Raider Battalion. 2 months later, his battalion was part of the U.S. force which conducted amphibious operations on the Japanese-held island of Bougainville in the South Pacific Ocean area. Upon landing, the 2nd Raider Battalion became trapped in a well-placed Japanese crossfire. McCAFFERY valiantly reorganized his force on the beach and launched an attack that swept away the enemy defenses. However, during the assault, McCAFFERY was struck 4 times in the chest by enemy machine gun fire. Despite the best efforts of the medical corpsman and the battalion surgeon, he did not survive his wounds. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph McCAFFERY was posthumously awarded both the Silver Star and the Navy Cross for, quote, extraordinary heroism while in command of the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion in combat against enemy forces, unquote. Joe McCAFFERY is buried at St. Michael's Cemetery in Chester. Upon his interment, a local newspaper account recorded, quote, last respects to one of Chester's best-known young men who went from the athletic field of the Pennsylvania Military College to a heroic death in action, unquote. In 1945, the U.S. Navy commissioned the USS McCaffrey, a Gearing-class destroyer. At the ship's launch in April of 1945, Joe McCaffrey's niece, Miss Patricia McCaffrey, christened the ship. The USS McCaffrey, hull number 860, served nearly 30 years in the fleet, providing naval gunfire support in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. In between those combat actions, the ship conducted communications relay and capsule recovery operations in support of the U.S. space program in the 1960s. The ship was decommissioned in 1974. Charles F.B. Price, class of 1902, 2nd Marine Division, Legion of Merit with V device for valor. Born in Hamburg, Germany in 1881, Charles Frederick Berthold Price entered PMC in 1898. He was a talented musician and was appointed chief musician as a junior. As a senior, he commanded B Company as a cadet captain. His classmates wrote that in order to avoid the exertion of making his bed every morning, he nailed his sheets and blanket to the bed and slept on the floor. After graduation, civil engineer Price was employed by the Pennsylvania Railroad. He also joined the Pennsylvania National Guard and served in Philadelphia's exclusive 1st City Troop of Cavalry. In 1906, he was commissioned 2nd Lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps. In the coming years, Price steadily advanced his military career, serving in Central America, including Cuba, Nicaragua, and Mexico during the period of the so-called Banana Republic Wars. For his outstanding work in Nicaragua with the 2nd Marine Brigade, Price was recognized by U.S. President Calvin Coolidge and the Nicaraguan government. In between his Central America assignments, he saw duty in the United States and in France in the latter months of the First World War. In 1935, Price joined the 4th Marine Regiment, then located in Shanghai, China. The 4th Marines, commonly known as the China Marines, were maintained on station in Shanghai at the American Legation to protect U.S. interests in the period of the Sino-Japanese War. In 1940, Price was promoted to Brigadier General and assumed command of the U.S. Marine component of the Department of the Pacific, also known as MARPAC. In 1941, just before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, he took command of the 2nd Marine Division with headquarters in San Diego, California. After the Pearl Harbor attack, Price was promoted to Major General and was a key figure in creating the Marine Raider units. He assumed command of the Samoan Group Defense Force with a mission of securing the approaches to the Samoan Islands in the South Pacific region. His successful efforts made the seizure of the Gilbert Islands possible, opening the Central Pacific to United States and Allied forces. For his heroic ability, perseverance, and tact, Price was awarded the Legion of Merit Medal with the Combat V device for valor, awarded by Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet and Pacific Ocean areas. At the end of 39 years of continuous active duty as a United States Marine, General Price was placed on the retired list in October 1945. In acknowledgement of his past service he was advanced on the retired list to the rank of Lieutenant General. Lieutenant General Price died in 1954. He is buried at the Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery in San Diego, California. William F. Spang, class of 1939, Marine Scout Bombing Squadron 132. William Franklin Frank Spang entered PMC as an excellent scholar and fine athlete. He was named to the Dean's List, and in his second and third years at PMC was a member of the Color Guard. Spang was appointed battalion captain as a senior. He was an outstanding athlete on the football, basketball, and tennis teams. As a tennis player, he earned the Tennis Tournament Cup 4 years in succession. Upon leaving PMC, Spang joined the U.S. Marine Corps and earned his combat pilot wings. He was assigned to Dive Bomber Squadron 132. In October 1942, his unit was sent to Henderson Field on the island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands chain of the South Pacific. On December 1st, 1942, 9 Douglas SBD dive bombers of Spang Squadron 132 were ordered to search for and attack an enemy light cruiser and 2 accompanying destroyers off the coast of Guadalcanal. Spang was the pilot of one of the dive bombers. The Marine pilots were unable to find the enemy ships and were ordered to return to base. Their base landing strip was in a cleared area surrounded by thick jungle. While attempting to land in the dark, Captain Spang's aircraft crashed into a large tree. Fortunately, the 1,000-pound bomb the aircraft was carrying did not explode. Members of the squadron's radio section were the first to arrive at the crash site. They pulled Spang and his gunner out of the wrecked plane. Although his gunner survived the crash, Spang succumbed to his injuries. Captain Spang was initially buried in the American Military Cemetery on Guadalcanal. Post-war, his remains were shipped home for a final interment in Cold Spring Presbyterian Cemetery in Cape May, New Jersey.